Today we're going to talk to Jake Claver. He was kind enough to come all the way up from Dallas to visit us here in Arkansas. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother. You and I have a lot of different ventures together, so it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
I really want to take it back because I know a lot of people follow you and a lot of people come in and watch your content on various different stuff, but I don't really know that a lot of people know kind of like the Jake Claver origin story or any of that stuff. So how did you end up involved in digital assets? Like where did that come about to be a thing
Uh,
for you?
So really not until 2020. So I'm kind of late to the game in comparison to a lot of other people, at least in my mind, right? Almost 5 years at this point, but
We're still early.
that's
Yeah.
but there are other people that we work with, and they've been in the game for a decade or more.
Right.
And so just to kind of take it back to 2020, I was working in industrial sales, previous to that year, and had been acquired by a company to come help them scale their business. Had stepped away from that and was doing some M&A, and was saving for a home for my wife and I, and was doing well. I'd stay out of traditional stocks because I went to school for finance at the University of North Texas, and while I was there, been looking at stocks and,
What
and wanting to invest.
what were you wanting to do when you what made you choose to go into finance for your major in that? Like, you just
My
throw it across
dad,
the board?
well, so my dad, he was like, you need to go to school for business. Like, you can't just go get underwater basket weaving degree. Like, it needs to be something tangible and usable. And so, I always had an interest in numbers, right? I took calculus, was good at equations and things, and money was always of interest to me. It was always a topic of conversation in my house.
Right.
Wasn't always a good thing. But yeah, so I took an interest to that, and there's just a lot of different verticals that you could get into with finance, right? And my senior year, had a short internship at Northwestern Mutual, and just really got turned off to the whole industry for finance. Unfortunately,
Right.
they wanted you to like shill your friends and family insurance products and really not pay you much for it, and so I kind of stepped away from it. But it was always something in the back of my mind that I wanted to get into, and deal with, and just had my own personal stuff. Um, so again, kind of flash forward to 2020, I'd saved some money for my wife and I to purchase a home. I had my 401k from a previous employer, and when the market fell, COVID happened. I dove in, right, and while everybody else was
The
scared,
back of all pullback.
yeah, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Well, because and maybe even an origin story for that. I watched my dad in '08 or '09 after, American Airlines had almost gone bankrupt, and it was, like, less than $1 per share,
Right.
and he pulled me into the office and was like, "I think I'm gonna do this. I think I'm gonna throw everything we got on this stock," and he didn't pull the trigger on it, and had he would have retired much sooner,
Right.
right? He wouldn't have had to work until he died. He would have been, a multimillionaire within just a few years if he had pulled the trigger on that trade, but he just didn't have the cojones at the time. He's got wife, kids, so other
No.
bills and things. So I'm
You
young.
always have to kind of
You gotta weigh those things.
especially if you have a family
Yeah.
and everything else. It's
There's
a lot easier if you're just like a single guy to
roll the dice
yeah.
on something.
Yeah.
But for me, I was like, look, like this is a shot for me. I'm in my late 20s at the time. I've got some capital. Like let's put it to work. So um get into stocks, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Tesla, like things that I thought would still be okay and were blue chips and would rebound if the world shut down.
Right.
And
Well,
was
stuck at home, people are still using
right.
all those
Should have done
services.
Netflix. There's some other Zoom did really well. But anyway, I rode those back up, and I just didn't know, everybody was uncertain what the world's gonna do. Is it gonna continue? Is this gonna spread and get worse? So I was like, all right, this is gonna be a dead cat bounce. And this is like May, June 2020. And I started listening to a lot of Peter Schiff and Gold Bugs. And in college, they said, you need to de-risk, get into commodities or real estate, if stocks are gonna do poorly. And again, I didn't know if it was headed back down. I just knew that I'd doubled my money in a very short period of time. So I'm watching him and he starts debating a Bitcoin guy in this video that I'm watching. And I'm like blown away. I'm like, got it. Okay, now this is software. These are networks. I started to understand why everybody was so crazy in 2017,
Right.
which my brother had thrown like 5 grand at some joke coin in 2017. It turned into a couple $100 grand. He didn't cash out.
Do you remember what it was? No.
Loop ring. It might have been loop ring.
Gotcha.
Um, Anyway, and I felt vindicated because it crashed back down below 5,000. I was like, "See, told you that's a scam. You should have just got your money out," you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um,
So you hadn't gotten into Bitcoin or anything
None of
at
it.
all like that?
None of it. And, so I start researching, right? Because that's kinda who I am, like, when I latch on to something, I become fixated, which is good and bad for different things. Um, but so I dive in full force like a lot of people do, and you start to figure out, okay, like, this is something important. Um, there's tens of thousands of currencies at that point. What's the next Bitcoin? How do you like play this asset class? What does it look like? So I took all the money that I'd made in the stock market and I roll it into digital assets. And I diversified because I was ignorant. I'm just trying to find things that I think are going to do well, and it's all speculative. There really isn't there's some utility, but it's sparse, if any. I'm watching YouTube people, and then they're talking about like Theta and Cardano and VeChain and XRP. And
Did you have like a filter when you were, because I mean, there's a lot of YouTube channels.
oh yeah,
There's even more now, but I mean, that was always a thing for me. Is it's hard to know who actually is making any sense out of this and who's just pumping their bags and like what. How did you like land on
well, so
who you were listening to?
yeah, so, same thing. I'm looking at BitBoy, Crypto Lark, like a lot of the big names out there. I remember watching a few and I was like, these guys are kind of clowns, but, um, and they've done really well in the space. I'm not saying anybody's a clown. I'm just saying like it didn't resonate with me for whatever reason.
Right.
So I find Digital Dave, right? And you guys may or may not know him. He hasn't made a whole lot of content in the recent years, but back then he was putting out like a video a week and he was living in Thailand.
Okay.
And for me, I was like, "Okay, like, this guy moved, he's retired off of crypto,
Hmm.
or says he has,
Right.
and
There's
there's some proof that he
the story going on at this. It looks like.
yeah, he knows what he's talking
Yeah.
about, right?"
Mhm.
Kevin Cage was another one that I watched early on,
Kevin's really good. He's got a lot of
um,
really good stuff.
and he had retired in Puerto Rico,
Yeah.
right? So, like,
Yeah.
I tried to find people that had some type of track record and some type of, like, okay, they've, quote, unquote, "retired," and now they've moved to this jurisdiction with their money.
Right.
And those are the people I kinda latched onto.
Yeah. I know a lot of people have talked about like, post moon for whatever after a bull run or whatever that they want to move to another jurisdiction. Like, what's your take on people wanting to exit the United States entirely? Like, I mean, do you think that it's worth it a lot of the time if, for any other advantage other than, I mean, some people just want to move somewhere because they want to move somewhere, and that's fine.
Right.
But like, as far as
Like, being
should people consider that?
becoming an expatriate and, like,
Yeah.
giving up your citizenship here in the US?
Do you think that's something that at a certain point makes sense? Like,
Well,
other than just like an affinity for, I really like Thailand or something like that.
are you gonna come back here? That's always a consideration, right? Do you wanna give that up and not be able to return to the US? Do you have family here?
Right.
Um, where you're going, do you have family? Like, is what's pulling you to that jurisdiction always matters. Nomad Capitalist. I don't know if, I'm sure people watching this maybe have looked at that. That guy does a really good job of breaking down which jurisdictions you can move to, which are friendly and like go where you're treated best is kind of his mantra. Um, there's a 40% exit tax is really what it comes down to.
Right.
So if you make a bunch of money and your stuff's here, just know on the way out, the US is going to get theirs.
Right.
Right, and they can come after you for 10 years on the other side of that, and it's at least a year-long process to be able to become an expat and leave and renounce your citizenship
What
in the
what
US.
happens if, like, say we're at where, the market is now,
Yep.
you kind of start that process and then things run up.
Too bad, so sad, you're still paying. It's not like when it's not like you lock in the price point of your net worth when you start the process. It is when you sign on the dotted line and leave.
Gotcha.
So, during the bear market would have been a good time to
Yeah.
stock that if you were going to do it.
Yeah. What is there like a jurisdiction that you think makes a lot of sense for people?
I mean, we've been to Dubai a couple times in the last year. I really liked that there. I felt really safe. It's an interesting mesh of like Western culture and Sharia law. Um, they have free zones there where they kind of foster some innovation, and they've got common law that governs those areas. I think that they've kind of figured that out to bring in people. um, if you're in Europe and you have family in the UK, we see a lot of people that look at Portugal or Monaco or like Nevis, at least for setting up their entities. Anything under the Commonwealth, um, you're gonna be they're very stringent about how many days you can spend in the country. A good friend of ours, she's like meticulous about how many days she goes home and how many
She's
days.
still a British citizen, right?
Correct, yeah.
So until she gets her U.S. citizenship.
Anywhere that the Commonwealth is over. New Zealand's another one. They have, like, 42 or 48 different jurisdictions that they are
Yeah.
over. Um, for US citizens, if you're gonna leave, I see a lot of people moving to, like, South America, a few places down there.
Yeah. Like
Um
Argentina's been a hot topic lately for
Yeah, um,
Mila's changed a lot there. So I mean, it's an interesting development.
you have a lot of considerations around that, right? So, if you live up north and it's cold there, do you want to snowbird somewhere? You wanna go to a warmer client? Climate, a lot of people move to like Florida here domestically, or even a lot of people have moved to Puerto Rico because of the 4% flat tax there. Um, but again, you're locked. You have to spend at least 6 months in a day there in order to get the benefits. Can't vote. So it really just kind of comes down to like what is important to you. What type of lifestyle do you want to live? Um, but I mean, there's lots of Thailand,
Yeah.
super cheap to live there in comparison to here. Same thing with those South American countries, like your dollar just goes a lot further. Um, as we see a shift in global finance and that paradigm, that could change, right? Right now we have floating exchange rates, and if things become pegged and backed and they're 1 to 1, what does that look like? What does a level playing field look like? And the reason I quote that term is Trump. That was something he said multiple times, and
Right.
now that he's moving back into office.
Right. And no, so we have like Ripple's just released RLUSD,
Mhm.
and obviously there's other countries that are starting to do that. But like, how long do you think it's going to take before we start seeing like more stable coins enter the market for all of these other different countries? What's your take? Like, do you think that's going to start happening pretty quick?
I do. I think that there's going to be countries have been moving away from the U.S. dollar for a long period of time now. Middle East is looking to sell oil to other countries in their currencies. Um, yeah, as CBDCs kind of get rolled out and get going, I think that privatized stablecoins for corporations and other governments will definitely become more prominent. I think 2025 is going to be a big year for stablecoins.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes sense with the success that we've seen for the people that have launched them so far, right? It's
Yeah,
the
Tether made more money than BlackRock
yeah.
last year.
So
Like,
I mean, if you're going to do it, it's obviously a proven business model at this point. And then I know like Hedera has been working on their stablecoin studio project, which is really cool. I think that it makes a lot of sense that we'll see that roll out. I'm just curious, what the appetite's going to be for some of the smaller countries that maybe not necessarily have started implementing that yet.
you got
Y-
Palau, you've
yeah,
got, Bohemian Sand Dollar. There have been some pilot jurisdictions where they've already rolled out stable coins, or CBDC. And I I think you need that. I think you need some testing before the big boys wanna move in, and then they kinda go, "Okay, we'll take these pieces that worked and kinda put our own pizzazz on it, and leave the stuff that didn't."
yeah. What's so just to switch it up,
Yeah.
like what kind of clients are you working with on a daily basis, and like what kind of questions do you get repeatedly asked? Like what's the most common things that people are wanting to know and wanting to find out that are either, just now entering the space or have been in the space and are kind of looking to take further steps, I guess is.
Yeah, so we work with people across the board. Obviously, we run a multifamily office. We work with high net worth individuals and their families that have acquired a good amount of wealth in digital assets. And so we provide a full scope of services that they might need, whether that's wealth management, CPAs, accountants, the estate planning, philanthropic stuff. But I would say we also do a lot of proactive work. So people that have a significant allocation for them into digital assets. Um, on the wealth management side, we're at a 500,000 or more in current value for digital assets. We've seen a little bit of a run up here, and that's gained a lot of traction. People want to protect their assets, have them insured, have reduced counterparty risk or the risk of loss, right? So if you just got, a couple $1 million sitting on a ledger in your desk, you know,
Has that been a problem? Like, have you had any instances where you've talked to a client that that's like something crazy's happened because they weren't?
yes, yeah. Just yesterday, we talked with a client that lost close to $680,000 because of a phishing scam,
Oh wow,
on their ledger. I know another client
one of those like fake email type of things.
just typed their keys in and
Wow,
thought that it was ledger and, and
that's crazy.
they've got another 10,000,000 in assets, thank God, but, like,
Yeah,
it just
it's a big hit to take for.
when I had a client, last year, they were on Lobster Wallet and lost more than $10,000,000,
Wow.
because of a scam there, so just
What can do you know the ins and outs of like what was going on or?
I think that they just put money in something that they thought was legitimate, and it wasn't. They thought that they were buying XRP, and it was another token with a completely different supply, and they just were hoodwinked,
Yeah,
There's a lot of people out there, to your point earlier, that are on YouTube channels that say things, or and maybe have alternative motives or incentives, and they're people that they're speaking to don't necessarily they just take it at face value and do what they say.
right.
I don't want people to do that for anything we talk about here. It's not financial advice, only for entertainment purposes only. Always do your own research, go find it, go vet it, go look at it, make sure that it is what we say it is before you touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
still, like you said, early in the space, and there are a lot of scams and
Well,
sketchy stuff.
it's something too that I noticed that you know we kind of live in this community
Hmm.
where we know what's going on with digital assets pretty pretty on point with as it's happening.
Yeah.
But then you interact with people that maybe aren't spending time on YouTube or on X or some of these other platforms that have just no idea what's going on. And with all the exposure that has been coming back to digital assets lately, we're kind of entering that phase again that I've noticed that it seems like all the scam accounts and things are starting to pop back up. And we're starting to get into
There's some more money again.
bull market, and we've got alt season coming and everything else. And so it's like it seems like they're coming out in droves for imposter accounts. I know I have imposter accounts. You have some. Like, it's crazy. So do you think that um assuming that we enter into like a regulatory like framework in the near future, which I think is going to happen, do you think that a lot of the scam stuff is going to get shored up in some way, or do you think that it's still going to be a concern for people?
Well, so this kind of goes back to the product that we provide, right? The institutional custody.
Hmm.
It's quantum proof. It's not, I can't say quantum proof, but really robust in its security.
Yeah.
Um, and there's multi-sig, right? So
Okay.
we have to sign, you have to sign. If he designates somebody else to sign, they have to sign. So if you have trustee, like there's just so many layers of security in order to be able to move anything. And the keys are never seen by anybody. They're sharded and held across HSMs or hardware security modules inside level 4 facilities with armed guards and like multiple firewalls and just there's tons and tons of things in place to be able to mitigate any potential of loss. There's always some way that you could do it, but that's why Lloyd's insures the accounts that we have. And so I
Mhm.
think as more people move to institutional custody, you're going to see the banks, BNY has their Fireblocks um, custody that they've rolled out. You've got Medico, which was acquired by Ripple last year, and they're offering those solutions to people. I think a lot of the institutions are going to start rolling out the ability to custody your digital assets in a much more secure manner. And with that, along with regulations, it can be a lot less
Right.
problems for
Yeah.
people on the phishing side or
Yeah.
scams.
Still have the same kind of issues that people with like their banking apps
Yep.
now stuff a little bit less prevalent that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What what are you looking at right now outside? I mean, obviously, you're consolidated in XRP and we talk about that a lot, but like
Yeah.
if XRP was out of the equation and you were looking at other projects, like what's the most interesting stuff that's going on to you right
Probably Hedera. I mean, we met Mance and his team there at Consensus earlier this year. They were talking about tokenization of RWAs at that event. Hashgraph, Mike Maloney, I think he's a sharp guy. He was in on the ICO early on for Hedera. You wouldn't be there if it wasn't the council that they have in place. Google, IBM, Dell, Boeing, like banks, other large conglomerates. I think that they have positioned themselves really well to be adopted as one of the base layer chains um, for dApps and really Web3 as a whole.
Right.
I think there's going to be a ton of value that moves over that network. Aside from that, you've got XDC, you got Hyperledger. Both of those are working with people that we've had interactions with. Hyperledger Bosu, almost every merchant services or retail facing enterprise that we've interacted with has talked about, integrating with that. Um, and then XDC, we were at the event last year, actually sponsored it down there in Austin. Got to meet Andre Casterman and Simon from Uphold and a bunch of other people that attended there. But to see how he had put together an ISO standard for the communication between bill of lading and all of the other documents required for transacting, you know, moving supply across the Atlantic, and being able to finance that, I think that that's going to see some significant adoption. It's something that we're looking at for family office clients. If you're able to earn, 9, 10, 12% interest on a 90-day note
Right.
by supplying capital, I mean, you roll 3 or 4 of those a year, you're doing pretty good.
Sure.
So I think there's a ton of applications like we started the conversation with where blockchain and smart contracts are going to come into vogue and be used in the economy to reduce frictions. Um, I just think, for me, again, XRP is the reason I'm consolidated there is the ROI I think is going to be greatest on that asset in particular. And then I would look to diversify through borrowing against it and investing in those other projects I just mentioned.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. So what if you were looking for like applications, layer ones obviously provide a lot of
Mhm.
room for people to build stuff on that. Um, like that's that people are working on, or maybe that's that people aren't working on yet. Like, what do you think things are going to be that roll out in the short term that people are going to be able to make big use of that might, ultimately affect the layer ones in a positive way?
Anything that are payment streams where you could get paid faster, I think are likely to happen sooner than later. I think that, data security and being able to get paid for your data is probably like a 26, 27 time frame.
Hmm.
But 2025, I think, is really going to be centered around payments, smart contracts around that. So an application that I could think of off the top of my head that would be really relevant for construction um, and that industry would just be GCs paying all their subcontractors in a timely manner.
Right.
The GC will get paid by the project and then they distribute that down. But if you had contingencies about what portion of the project needed to be done in order to be able to receive payments
Sure.
on things, and there was some type of smart contract connected to an Oracle that could pull that data in and then remit payment immediately upon whatever completion was
Yeah.
needed. I think that would be huge because then the velocity of money across that happens much faster. There's really no like withholding payment from people, which I know happens, or people don't get paid in a timely manner, and it stops the construction job, or they have issues because of it. My dad did schedule cost control for construction projects, and so
Gotcha.
that's probably why I'm like gravitating toward
Yeah.
that. But
Well, I mean, if it's something you understand as a problem, then it makes sense to.
right. Latency in payments
Yeah.
realistically is anytime there's a delay in payment for people and you could have a smart contract that sat between the two and that money was escrowed or
Mm.
remitted or processed faster. I think that those frictions will be removed over the next 12, 24 months.
What um what kind of stuff do you think is gonna happen that people need to be watching out for now? Like obviously we've had some price appreciation
Mhm.
and maybe it was meaningful for some people, maybe it hasn't been yet, but people are allocated at whatever level they
Mhm.
can be. Um, I know you talk a lot about planning ahead for
Yep.
those things. What do you think like the most critical steps that people need to take, like bar none, what you need to do versus
Yep.
there's all kinds of other things that you could take into consideration, right? But like if you're like anyone off the street that has an allocation of digital assets, what is the thing that you say, make sure you do this?
Get it off of an exchange. Probably the
Yeah.
first one. We've just seen so many problems with that with FX, Celsius, Voyager. The institutional custody we provide is never commingled. It's siloed, separated, bankruptcy remote, insured, all those things. But again, you need at least 500,000 in value to get it into that, right? So maybe a decent wallet, right? I really like that for a cold storage wallet to be able to get your assets off of an exchange. I'd figure that out. Some of our clients, I don't want to say don't have the time for that, but they're focused on their business and other things. And so they've got a couple $1,000,000 sitting on an exchange and we're, working with them to get that into institutional custody. But so that'd probably be the first thing, just own your own assets. And then if you do have an appreciable amount and you think that you're going to take profit, set up an LLC,
Mhm.
right?
So if someone has, like, say they already have an LLC, even if it's like a
For
business
something
that they
else.
have operating currently, or if it's something that they just, formed and not used,
Mhm.
like, is there something specific they need to do to have an LLC in place that's gonna be
Benefit.
beneficial for that?
Yeah, we form the LLCs in Wyoming,
Mm.
right? So, and it's not to say that you can't use the LLC that's in your state if that's where you reside. The benefits for Wyoming are threefold. One, no state tax. So Texas, Florida, you're not getting an extra benefit there. But if you're in, say New York or California or one of those other states that do have state tax, you get an added benefit. Secondary to that, you have attorney-client privilege. So whoever files that, their name and address and things are going to appear on the public data for that, and so your information's not there for people to just look you up. Um, use a PO box, hopefully, so it's not your home address that you're getting mail to.
Well, and that's something that's interesting too, because I mean, I think a lot of people look at, you know, trying to have the anonymous, stuff, and it's not like you're not necessarily trying to hide anything, but there's some protection to that because there are people that don't have your best interests in mind, I guess,
Right.
that would potentially try to use your information to.
Set up an account, take money from you, do yeah. You just wanna make it more difficult, right? You can't ever remove everything, but
Mhm.
the more difficult you can make it for people if you do have larger sums of money or plan to in the future based on your investments, the better setup you're gonna be. And I was just gonna go back to the 3rd thing there. Wyoming has the best regulations in the US for digital assets.
Okay.
So, they're going to look kinder on things and be more flexible with you if you're working in that capacity in that state versus something like a New York where you require a bit license.
Gotcha. Was for people that don't know, I guess, what is the bit license? I know what it is, but I know a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
So if you can explain kind of how that works.
So I think that that's actually probably going to be the way that this goes, where each state kind of lists out their own qualifications to be able to do some type of, work with digital assets. Because I mean, you're working with money, you're working with value.
Yeah.
New York has been proactive, and people may be frustrated with how stringent their regulations have been around digital assets.
Right.
However, I would say they did protect their people from participating in FTX or Voyager or Celsius or some of the other problems that this space has had. Now, you again might be upset about that because you weren't able to allocate and get exposure to other stuff that did well, like Bitcoin.
Right.
Um, but It's basically a certification they require a business or an enterprise to have to be able to operate or work with people that reside in New York for digital assets.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so for people, like, especially if they have state tax concerns for their LLC or something like that now, like, we're in December now. It's
Mhm.
getting close to tax time. What what do people need to be doing to prepare for their tax season? Is there, like, if they taking profits, if they're just holding, like, what stuff needs
There's
to happen?
there's a couple things, right? So if you were down, the wash rule doesn't apply in crypto. So in stocks, you can't do this. So let's say you wanted to sell at a loss and lock in those capital losses to be able to roll them forward next tax year.
Right.
You have to wait 30 days in stocks to buy your position back. Crypto, you can sell, lock in the losses, and then buy right back. So if you are down and you did sell earlier this year, you could offset some of those capital gains with losses at this point, which is great. Um, if you do plan to take profits here at the end of the year, just be aware of the capital gains on that. I know we're all hopeful that Trump makes it where, U.S. based companies and their digital assets that they're working with are not taxable in that capacity. We'll have to see, he doesn't move into office until January, and maybe he retros it, maybe he doesn't. So
A lot of unknowns.
yeah,
Well,
um,
and then, it's how is it gonna shake out? Because it's like from the past administration, you delivered on a
a
lot.
lot of what he said, yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think that it's anything that it's like, "Ah, he's not gonna do that," but you still have to worry about the rest of the government.
right.
So, um, that's kinda where I'm at with it, is that it's like I'm hopeful,
hmm
but until it's done,
We don't.
yeah, I'm not really just gonna base my whole position on
You
eventually a
you
possibility.
got to operate under the constraints that exist, right? So one other thing. So let's say we do get a big boom here at the end of the year, and you're like, I'm gonna capitalize on this. We're gonna sell a couple $1 million. So pumped, cool. Um, you might owe 40% tax,
Right.
even if you have it in an LLC. So, this is another question I get frequently. People are like, oh, well, I move it into the LLC and it's tax free. No, 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 no. You just get the full tax code to be able to offset the income. So however you spend that money could be used to offset things.
Gotcha.
So buy a vehicle and you can use accelerated depreciation and get a good clip removed there. You could set up insurance policies. But one of the other benefits you would have if things are in an LLC versus in your personal name is you can reset your tax year once every 10 years.
Okay.
So, say you take a bunch of profits here in December, it's like the last week of the year. You could file the form required. I think it's a 1028 with the IRS and change your tax year back to September 31st. And now you get another 10 months or, yeah, almost 10 months in 2025
Mhm.
to figure out how you're going to spend that money or what you're going to do with it to be able to offset the capital gains that you had.
Right.
Um, so, you get an LLC just gives you so much more flexibility, than you would have as just a person holding
Right.
crypto.
Yeah. And is it something that, like, what percentage of people that you're working with, like, does pretty much everybody end up moving that direction after they kinda understand the concept, or is there still people that
We
are reluctant to do it for some reason?
we require anybody on the wealth management side to have an entity that is holding their assets. So that could
Mhm.
be a trust, an LLC, it could be a limited company if you're in the UK, some type of entity wherever you reside globally, or in whatever jurisdiction you would like to hold your assets in, has to own those assets to work with us.
Gotcha.
Um, there's a bunch of reasons around that, but I think it provides way more benefit than downside. I really just don't understand. I mean, I've gone back and forth on it a lot, trying to figure out what reason not to there is, and really the only thing that I've come to is if you have less than maybe $50,000 in digital assets, if I had to draw a line somewhere for people, spending the 1,500 or the 3 grand on setting up an LLC, you might be better off just buying more digital assets,
Right.
right? But
Especially if they're willing to hold longer term, I guess,
right.
that way.
But if it's, beyond that point and you are planning to take profit and you do want all of the ability to mitigate taxes and the flexibility it provides, I think it's well justified to spend that amount of money.
Do you I know that you've talked a fair bit about being able to leverage against
Mhm.
assets. Um, what's that look like right now for people that maybe don't want to sell but want to be able to use that liquidity
Mhm.
for another investment to be able to cover their cost and drive back the revenue to some
Yeah.
shape.
I think that that's the holy grail in this stuff, right? So imagine if you had been able to borrow against your Bitcoin at $100.
Right.
You didn't sell it.
Right.
So many people sold their Bitcoin early and thought they did really good, but
I'm one of those. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you're 100,000 plus right now, right? So if if you could have just borrowed against it and refinanced that note over and over again,
Sure.
you have your cake and you eat it too, is really what it means, right? So you got to service the debt. There's going to be an interest rate and payment schedule. There's going to be terms to borrowing. What we're seeing right now, if it's Bitcoin, you can get it as low as 7 or 8% interest. LTV on that somewhere between 70 and 90% with some of the partners we have. If you're holding an altcoin or Ethereum, those numbers are a bit higher on the interest and a bit lower on the LTV or loan to value ratio. So, somewhere between 10 and 13% most of the time if you're borrowing it for the interest rate. And then that's on an annual. And, the LTV is somewhere between 30 and 60% most of the time if it's not Bitcoin.
Are people able to take leverage against like other networks like HBAR and XLM and stuff like that now, or are we still like having to wait for that to transpire? Like, what are you seeing from?
How much money do you have is really what it comes down to. So the people that we work with, partners that we have, they're willing to do, $500,000 loan, $1 million loan. That's where it becomes meaningful for them on the fees and the interest.
So they could do other more alternative assets than just like your
Yeah.
primary blue chips, ones that have some long term.
Yeah, as long as there's enough liquidity in the token, it's not some crazy meme coin. There's exchanges that have volume for trading it, and you have enough of it to make it meaningful for the loan. We have partners.
Okay. I think I think a lot of people, have the notion in their head still. Cause I mean, I see comments that I get on videos and people talking about selling stuff a lot. And it's like, I don't know how many people have really considered that as an option. But like you said, I think that to me, that makes the most sense long term for assets that I believe are going to play a long term utility
Mhm.
role in things that are happening that way because the price going up is more likely to stabilize after utility comes into effect that way. Whereas,
100%.
whereas I get it if people are in a meme coin project or something that is super volatile for whatever reason. That when it's time to sell, it's time to sell because there might not be another opportunity until
Well, and,
the
and
next bull
again,
market, if at all.
like I said, you're not going to get a loan against that because the partners that they're looking at the same things you are as far as like the risk associated with it. And if it goes to zero, like
Yeah,
they're not okay with that.
yeah. Do you think do you think Solana is still going to be a prevalent network with all these other things rolling out? I know like XLM is starting to bring meme coin marketplaces
Mhm.
on. First Ledger has done
Yep.
really well on the XRPL. I've seen a bunch of people migrate from Solana into that. Um, there's Solana ETFs that are being filed, and it seems like they're from the institutional perspective that there's some interest in that,
Hmm.
but obviously it's had some network issues. Um, but they have a big community and they've been around a while. Like,
Hmm.
what do you think's going to happen with Solana? And I don't mean to FUD anyone's project on this. I'm just genuinely
Yeah.
curious. Like, it's a point of consideration. I feel like because I don't know what else is going on.
Besides the meme coins on the network,
That seems to be their main driver for the most part.
for sure has been.
Yeah. So, what do you think?
I mean, you have smart contracts there. It's definitely usable. It's faster and cheaper to transact on that network than on Ethereum. It has a lot of positives. The downside is that there are periods of time where the network has gone down for hours or a day. Enterprise solutions can't have that. Like that. It, what's acceptable for Microsoft is like 3 seconds per year.
Right.
That's their tolerance for downtime, and we've seen some problems with that. It lasted longer than that too, but
Yeah.
I just don't see Microsoft or these large corporations adopting Solana and having the counterparty risk of that network going down. And they won't have a way to fix it, right? Even if they're running a node or a validator on the network, they have visibility of things, but they can't fix it. So they're gonna stick to things that have continued to run without outages. Um, Maybe a short pause is okay on stuff. I mean, the XRPL paused the other day, but it's never been down
Right.
in the full history of that network running.
Yeah.
So I think that something like that has a lot better chance to get institutional and enterprise adoption for their products and services versus a Solana. What's the long-term value of the network? I don't know. There may be some use case where people are okay with outages for an hour here or there, or a day here or there.
Right.
And those may find that network and be like, cool, low latency, low fees. This is, but if you have other options that don't have those issues, I don't know why you would
Hmm.
use. There needs to be a benefit to that piece of the network in whatever application it's being used in versus something else.
Right. And it seems to me that as time goes on, kind of the same thing that's happened to Ethereum is that I still think Ethereum's got a very strong community and a lot of things there, but a lot of the original like secret sauce of Ethereum has now been replicated
Mhm.
and migrated into other ecosystems. Like, XDC has all that and more. And they introduced subnets on XDC with their new update. Um, like, how do you think that the ability to have subnets for private blockchain applications is going to be like? What's the benefit of that? Because I know they talk about it a lot, but I don't know that people understand
Yeah,
what that could mean.
there's well, and I don't want to be demeaning with this, but there are people that are like more esoteric. They believe that there should be open, decentralized networks, and that's how everybody should transact. Do you want all of your search history, that everything you've looked it up, like, to be public knowledge for everybody? Do you want your bank transactions and all the stuff that you're purchasing to be publicly available for everybody? There's certain privacy that people want to have and corporations want to have.
Well, it goes back to like getting a Wyoming LLC, I guess, is the
Right,
is
yeah,
everyone's want to broadcast.
yeah, so there's certain things that you do or actions that you take that you don't necessarily want everybody and their mother to know about, and so I think in those situations, you want to be interoperable with those main nets to be able to settle transactions or move data packets or whatever you need, but you want your own privacy on those networks. So those subnets and private networks that are interoperable with main nets, I
Yeah.
think are key. And that's why you're seeing a lot of these um, specific networks like XDC, like you mentioned, migrate to those abilities, because if they don't have that, I think they're going to get left behind.
Yeah. And there's a lot of interoperability networks that are starting to kind of get some traction.
Mhm.
Like Chainlink obviously has been around a long time and done some really great things with their integrations. They're
Mhm.
working with Swift to make everything happen there and have grown a lot. The token price is up from where it's been again, and I think it'll probably continue to rise. But now we'll use Axelar as an example. Like, how do you see Axelar being able to take market share or create market share where Chainlink isn't right now?
Chainlink is an oracle, so they're interoperable with networks. They're able to move data or information from the real world when situations happen on chain, so that it's usable inside of a smart contract. Axelar, and again, I'm ignorant here. I need to do more research. Seems to me more of a routing mechanism, right, for interoperability between networks. So that allows the information on this network to be shared with another network. It's not necessarily bringing information from the real world on chain. So there's going to be a ton of different applications where, you know, a certain network decides like, this is our niche, this is what we do.
Yeah.
But I do think that interoperability between networks and filling those gaps is going to be key. So you got things like Quant and Overledger do some similar functionality. But I think, Axelar is really kind of drilled down on EVM compatible chains and allows that to be interoperable with other networks that don't necessarily have that functionality. And that bridge it's probably going to have a lot of traffic going over it,
Right.
right? So, and these are all things like the average person isn't going to care
Right.
about this stuff. They just
Yeah.
want their data or their money to get from point A to point B, and these two
Yeah.
people will be able to work together. And that's really what it comes down
So
to.
it's it's something that I kind of run up against is that I think there's so many pieces of that pie for interoperability, how
Absolutely.
this works and stuff that it's like people don't necessarily understand the nature of what the multi-chain future looks like. So like really it's not necessarily a threat to chain link so much. It's
Mm-mm,
not necessarily
not at
a
all.
threat to XLR so much. It's just that like different stuff does different things. And
Well,
there's always going to be a place for those.
and you have market share, right? So if you were to look at all the search engines right now,
Right.
people use Google as almost synonymous with search at this point, but there's still 80 or 85% of volume on search engines, whereas there's another 15 or 20% that are
Yeah.
other parties like
Right.
DuckDuckGo and Brave.
Briscoe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of them, right, that are vying for that other slice of the pie there. So I think it'll be similar with some of these networks. You're going to see winners that are the majority of whatever niche they're focused on. They're going to aggregate that market share, but there's still going to be the Pareto principle where it's 80-20. They get 80% of the market, but there's another 20% there, and that could be trillions of dollars
Right.
that's up for grabs for these other players in that niche.
Yeah. There's still some like low cap projects or low token price projects that exist, like and still that are in that sub 10 cent
Mhm.
range that are doing cool things.
Player.
What do
Yeah.
you think is worth looking into? Like maybe not necessarily telling somebody go ape into this, but if they're looking for some other things to diversify into just to get a large allocation of units while the price is still low in certain things. Like what other stuff is interesting right now to you?
I mean, so we've seen a pullback in XDC back below, 6, 7 cents here. Um, Again, if they're successful and they are adopted at scale for trade finance, just that application alone, you could see $1 to like a $5 XDC.
And they're still not listed on a tier one exchange like
Right.
Binance or something. I know that they've been working on that is what I've read, but
So that one's, probably a good opportunity.
how do you feel about Constellation, DAG?
DAG, I think they've started working with it's the interoperability thing, right? So we're seeing Hoskinson start to have conversations. I think
Mhm.
DAG, and their security, it's an acyclic DAG, or graph, right?
What's that mean for people that
Um, so you have a blockchain, right? So a blockchain is this block of data and this block of data
right,
are connected through a chain, and there's a hash or a cryptographic lock that makes this immutable and not changeable, right? And those are kind of in a line. Uh, and that you have to have different consensus mechanisms, whether that's proof of work or proof of stake, or there's a bunch of different ones, but they lock those things up and they encrypt it.
yeah,
DAG is faster, and not every single node has a full history of all the transactions, but they have enough that it's broken up and you could reconstruct it, right?
yeah,
And so it kind of bounces back and forth like this, and this node may have a piece of this one and this node may have a piece of this one, but all together that constellation makes up a full history node of the network. And if you're doing that, because not every single node has to have a full history, it makes it much faster
yeah,
and actually also more secure. And that's the same way Hashgraph also kind of works.
mm,
Um, so, I would encourage people to look at the different consensus mechanisms and,
yeah,
different types of chains. But again, most people aren't even going to care on that. They're just like, is it more secure? Is it faster?
right.
Cool.
Well, and some people are just here for like, what's the ROI going to be
Right.
and stuff, which
Yeah.
that's fine too. But I think it's hard to back into what that number looks like if you don't understand what the
Well,
network's doing.
Yeah,
It's
well,
hard to,
when you look at stocks, you
right,
look at the company.
right,
What are they selling? Service, product? What's the product market fit? Who do they have on their team? Who are their partnerships? How are they sourcing their material? Like all of those things play a role in the market cap and the valuation for a company.
well, and it's similar is that there's certain blockchain networks that like I think the technology is fantastic, but I'm not sure who they're working with,
Right.
what's going on. And I've tried to research it and can't find some things sometimes. So it's hard for me to want to pull the trigger on you know, looking into holding an asset
Mhm.
when I don't really know who or how or why it's going to get used for lack of partnerships or any other adoption that way. And so I think that because there's there's a lot of really smart people that build
Mhm.
out these projects
Very.
that are good at the technology piece, but maybe just don't have the marketing behind it or business development behind it to make it successful ultimately, which is sad because they've spent a lot of time building really cool stuff.
Right.
Um,
Was
but you see that in every industry, I think, too. There's people that have brilliant ideas and just don't know how to
I
get it out in the world. So,
I was gonna say, so you and I both come from, like, a fitness background. You were a power lifter, and I was a bodybuilder, and so we've taken a lot of supplements
mhm,
over the years,
yeah,
and, I can distinctly remember a few different companies that were great at marketing,
yeah,
fantastic. Their product was garbage,
yeah.
but everybody bought it
Drink this sugar water.
because and they made a bunch of money, but
Yeah,
there were other people that had really high quality premium supplements that just never got market penetration
yeah.
because they didn't have a cool, sexy logo.
Yeah, I was really big, and I still really am into, NutraBio,
Mhm.
and I love that brand. Everything about it, the transparency they provided and everything else was phenomenal, and it's like, I would tell people what I was taking, and they had never heard of it at all, and I would have to try to convince people to go buy it. Just be like, "No, like, their stuff's really good, I promise." And they're like, "Well, it's a little bit more than, what I'm buying at Walmart." And, "Okay." Just
Well, and the marketing on the labels like this
Yeah,
plain, easy, not sexy,
yeah,
so but that's what it is. At the end of the day, you can have a really good product and a really good team, but if you don't have the EQ or the sales or the marketing to generate the relationships and the revenue,
yeah,
you get a really cool pet rock. Like it,
right. What do you think, what do you think's going on with Flair right now? I know that we've seen Hugo starting
Mhm.
to make some noise,
Yep.
getting back into, a lot of different discussions lately. I know there's a lot of people in the XRP community that are really bullish on Flair, but what do you think's going on, and where do you see that going in the short term and the long term?
Um, so it's interesting to me when the snapshot was taken. I think a lot of the people that would have redeemed the flare would have been banks and institutions and enterprises that had Ripple partnerships previous to the lawsuit,
Yeah,
right? They had gotten an allocation of XRP, especially with the larger wallets. There were 2.7 million wallets that were taken. The snapshot was taken of in December 12th of 2020.
yeah,
Um, Obviously, there was speculation on the price when the futures were launched on Binance, or maybe it was BitTrue. I don't remember which one they were trading on, but it was at like 50 cents before the distribution actually happened, and then it plummeted after that down to less than a penny at one point.
right.
Um, and maybe that was to get people to liquidate their holding or not continue to stake it and earn yield on Bifrost because it wasn't going to be meaningful. But, I do think that there's gonna be a lot of applications for DeFi using that protocol that maybe the banks and the enterprises that were holding it during the snapshot will roll out, in competition to Ethereum and DeFi and a lot of these other things that people have been using over the past 4 years here. F assets and wrapping those and earning yield on other things aside from whatever native yield you could get on a network, like you could wrap your Doge and make money with your Doge,
Right.
right? Same thing for XRP, same thing for your
When
Bitcoin.
something gets wrapped, like, do you
Mhm.
mind kinda explaining
Yeah,
what that, like, I know it's used a lot, but I think
people
a lot of
don't
people
know.
probably don't really understand what's happening or why.
Yeah, so let me try to think through the easiest way to explain this. You have an asset that's native to a network, which means it's usable there.
Mhm.
Okay. But if I wanted to use it on something else, you need a way to represent that value over here. And you don't necessarily want to connect to that network. You just want this value on this chain to do something else cool, right? Earn money, borrow, whatever it is. So when you wrap that token, you're escrowing it or locking it on this chain so that nobody else can use it. And you issue that value or representation of value over here. So, like, you have paper markets for gold. It really ends up being a derivative, is what it is, but you're not going to rehypothecate or,
So you can consider it like wrapping paper.
yeah, yeah.
Happy holidays, I bet. Hey, yeah, no, I think that's good, and To me, it's been telling with the level of partnerships that I've seen coming in to start,
Yeah.
talking to Flair about what the future is there. Um, I'm curious to see what that looks like how long it's gonna take to get that to a point. But, like, do you think that's, like, what's gonna be the future of Bitcoin
Yeah,
as, like, a usable asset
I
versus where it's at right now?
I do ordinals are interesting, like, there's a lot of people that have tried to move smart contracts or some of the capabilities that we've seen on these other networks on chain for a Bitcoin. You've got the Lightning Network, which is kinda like, Matic or Polygon for Ethereum to reduce the latency and fees, but again, you're wrapping the Bitcoin and then trading that value and then, swap it back later on when you wanna move it on the native chain.
Right.
Um yeah, I think that digital gold, like there's a limited supply, there's supply and demand, and people are willing to pay a premium for Bitcoin, or at least I think it's a premium over what it's worth. That's okay. The market decides what something's worth, right? So yeah, I think it could be used as collateral. You wrap it on another network and then put it to work in some way to be able to generate yield, or you're borrowing against it. Um, when I look at an investment, I always kind of go back to this. I I want ROI, so return on my investment that is greater than whatever the inflation rate is, so real return. I want cash flow of some kind, which Bitcoin doesn't currently give you.
Yeah.
And then I want to be able to borrow against it to take that liquidity as it grows in value and deploy it somewhere else or live my lifestyle tax free. And so Bitcoin has one of like ROI for sure,
Yeah.
right? It's had significant ROI over almost literally any other asset over the past decade.
Yeah.
Bar none, Bitcoin's the winner. But during that period, if you just held the Bitcoin and didn't sell any, you really didn't have the other 2 until here just recently. Now you can start to borrow against your Bitcoin, but there's still no cash flow off of your Bitcoin. And that's why a lot of people, want businesses or real estate versus digital assets. But if you could bring those qualities to Bitcoin by wrapping it, I think a lot of people would want that.
Yeah. With all the ETFs and things that are coming into the space with, Grayscale's obviously made some huge waves. Um, you know, Bitwise, we've got Canary Capitals now, filing for XRP ETFs and all these others that are starting to put that stuff in, alongside with your large institutions, your BlackRock and Fidelity and all these. Do you think that we'll continue to see more and more ETFs across a bunch of different assets? Or do you think that it's going to be limited to kind of the primary blue chip, the top 10 type of networks?
There's we were actually on a call with an investor group earlier today and asked them what benchmark they were using against their fund. And there is a benchmark of the top 20 digital assets
Hmm.
weighted, right, based on,
Yeah.
what they make up in there. I think they're all 5%. So I think that you're gonna see some more structured products like that just to mitigate the risk and volatility in the space, that involve multiple assets. The spot ETFs, I think, will be like you said, for the blue chips,
Right.
and people will aggregate a bunch of those assets and then issued structured products because the only way that you can get access to this stuff in your 401k, which is where the majority of people have their retirement,
Right.
is through a structured product. You can't buy digital assets outright. In an IRA, you can,
Yeah.
but
It, I know some people have asked, like, when does it make sense to get an IRA? Who
Hmm.
who should get an IRA? Like, what's that look like?
um,
It's something that you start a job somewhere, they give you your benefits package and you check some boxes and that's it. Like, how do you make that
I,
decision? What's smart for you?
I can tell you my opinions, and again, everybody's going to have different opinions. You talk to Dave Ramsey, he thinks you should just have a ton of those.
Yeah.
Um, I'm young, and so for me, thinking about retirement, it's good to have that in your back pocket. So again, I had the 401k from a previous employer that I rolled to a self-directed IRA, and I eventually ended up cashing that out because I wanted to hold the assets personally. I didn't trust I trust capital holding my assets. And liquidating it then was going to be a lot less cost to me during a bear market than it would be on the other side of my assets appreciating.
Right.
and I'm not going to retire for a long time, right? So people that are 45 and older, I think it's a no brainer
Yeah.
for retirement accounts. You're not that far from 60. It's 15 years. But again, the longer you compound something, the better off you are too. So I think small children, it can make a lot of sense to set up these types of accounts. An IUL makes a lot of sense for a young child, which is an insurance product. There's a lot of different tools for a lot of different reasons. To speak specifically to an IRA, you have a couple different kinds. So you can do a Roth IRA. You're limited to $6,500 a year that you can put into that up until age is I think it's 55, and then for the next 10 years you can contribute $7,500 per year. When you set it up the first time, you can go back 1 year. So you can put in 13 grand up front. And if you're going to do that on something that's going to appreciate like crazy, like private equity or digital assets, then that can be really meaningful. And that is basically tax free. You're paying tax on the front end of that.
If I'm like self-employed,
Yeah.
somebody like how does somebody get started with setting up? Because I mean, obviously, if you start a job somewhere and they give you benefits and you can just
Yeah.
check the boxes, that's one thing. But like, if I own a business or I'm an independent contractor for something else, like how does someone even take advantage of an IRA? Like, do they have to? What steps are involved?
You would go to a broker, right? So you might go to Fidelity, Schwab, Goldman, one of those. You can set up an individual retirement account. So you could set up an individual 401k or an individual IRA or self-directed IRA,
Yeah,
and then you would fund that account. Um,
and you can convert them after the fact if you want to.
Correct. Well, yeah. So the 401k people are going to be stuck on. We've had this question a couple different times. They're like, "Hey, I work for my employer. I've got 300 grand in my 401k. They do a great match. I've been here a long time." And that's the reason I would do a 401k is if your employer matches at all, that's free money,
Sure.
right? And then if you leave there, you can roll it, like I said, to a self-directed IRA.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, as an individual that works for a business, you would just we can set them up, Digital Wealth Partners, work with people to, establish those accounts, especially if they want to invest in digital assets.
And so basically they can that's like whenever they're getting paid, whatever
Yeah,
their
comes right out
paycheck
of your check.
is, then they're not having to think about it
Yep.
necessarily that way. Cool. What what is one thing that you want to kind of impart on people? We're getting through a lot of ground on this, and I want to
Yeah.
make sure it's digestible for people. But like, what's if you could give one piece of advice coming into 2025 for anybody that's new to digital assets or kind of like not as familiar or seasoned in the space, like what do you think that people need to be doing?
Learning. Um, I try to consume content from a lot of different places on a daily basis. You're never going to know it all, right? Want to surround yourself with good good-hearted, intelligent people. Get around the right professionals before you have a bunch of money. If you do have an allocation digital assets, you think that's going to go 100, 1000x in this next bull cycle here.
Yeah.
Um, Find the people now that you want to work with, and we've done a good job of putting together what I think is the best team in the US for that. But irrespective of if you work with Digital Ascension Group, Digital Family Office, Digital Wealth Partners, go find people in your neck of the woods that understand this asset class, ask them questions, and figure that out. Be proactive, I guess, is really what I'm saying here, and never stop learning about it. There's always more. Figure out what interests you, and then at least be educated on it enough to have a conversation with those professionals that you're seeking out, so that they're not going to pull wool over your eyes.
Well, well, thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely,
I think this has been a lot of good information for people, and I'm sure we'll do it again sometime in the not too distant future.
for sure. Thanks again for having me.
All right. See you guys later.